G'day and welcome to the video. In this video I'll be making this gorgeous Warden helmet from the For Honor game by Ubisoft, or Ubisoft, whichever sounds better to your ear holes. You may have seen in my last two tutorial videos I made another helmet from the game, going into detail on every stage of the building and painting process. So if you haven't watched those videos yet, I would highly recommend going to watch them first, as the rest of these types of videos will use some of the same techniques. Now, on to the building. For this particular helmet, I thought it best to dip my toes into the world of cosplay and use EVA foam sheets to achieve the complex shape of the helmet, as foam is more malleable than cardboard. I start out like any man making a helmet would, drawing around some templates, using as little space as possible so there's more foam for me for future use and less for the environment. Once that was done, I then roughly cut out the shapes using a sharp box cutter. I then needed to neaten up the edges and add a bevel to some parts using my finger, or if your finger doesn't do this, then a Dremel with a sanding attachment will do the trick also. Now it's time to start assembling the pieces. I'm using this contact adhesive to bond the foam together with one another, so even my big head cannot divorce them. To do this, I first cut the finger off of this glove and put it on my finger as protection. For extra protection, I use this potent stuff in a well ventilated area, as the smell is enough to make a grown man trip balls. Taking all the necessary safety precautions, I squeeze out some adhesive like urine coloured toothpaste along both contact points and then spread it around the surfaces using my, well, finger. Leaving the adhesive to dry for a minute or two, I can now push the two surfaces together, letting the power of attraction marry these pieces together for life. Then, like Cupid himself, I pair the two faceplates together as well. The great thing about EVA foam is that you can bend it to any shape you like using a little bit of heat. Then when the foam cools, it keeps its shape. To apply the heat, I'm using this industrial hairdryer or heat gun on the inside of the foam and then bend it to the shape I desire. In this case, just making it a little bit more round. Now, to assemble the upper and lower face plates together using the same gluing ceremony as before. Once the helmet's face is done, it's on to assembling the rest of the pieces. Before attaching the top of the helmet, I'm using my heat gun to make the shape of the face more flat and symmetrical by simply squashing it against my work surface. For the lid of the helmet, I wanted to make it more bowl shaped like the images I'm working from, so what better way to do that than bringing on the heat and going to town with my fist. Disclaimer, my fist was the roundest thing I could think of at the time, but looking back at it now I probably could have just used a bowl. I used my magic finger, again, to delete some material around the edge so it wasn't as thick, making the lid less bulbous when it came to attaching it to the rest of the helmet. Speaking of which, that is what I did next. After attaching the lid, it left behind a little bit of an overhang, so I used my Dremel and sanding attachment this time to make the edges flush with the rest of the helmet. With the basic helmet assembled, I moved on to detailing using this 2mm thick A3 sheet to carve out the helmet's face. After gruesomely cutting out the face, I traced the shape onto the helmet where I wanted it to sit and made sure the eye holes lined up. Wouldn't want to have done all this for me not to be able to see where I was going. Speaking of being able to see, I still needed to poke out the eye holes. Now, I can go ahead and lube up both surfaces with some more tender love and glue, and then carefully stick down the face, starting with the centre line and the nose. For the two eye flaps, I stretch them straight, making sure they line up with the markings before committing and sticking it down, because this puppy ain't coming off without a fight. Next, I stick down the average forehead, size strip, and cut any excess off the top. For the rim around the lid, I use an extra long strip with a width of 17mm, meticulously wrapping it around a chunk at a time and gluing it into place. Cutting off the excess at the end, of course. Before I can make this foam concoction look perfect, I needed to seal it. And by this, I mean blasting the whole helmet with heat, causing the pores in the foam to close, and leaving a shiny surface in which paint would adhere to. Now, for the tedious job of filling in all unwanted gaps between joins. To accomplish this, I'll be using this adhesive caulk, commonly used in bathrooms and kitchens, but for this unique circumstance, it'll be just as useful in making my helmet look more attractive. I will be applying thick amounts of this paste to the joins between the face and forehead detailing, and for the top of the rim where it joins with the lid. I then use a little bit of water and my finger to blend the paste with the foam, creating a seamless appearance. This also removes any troublesome fingerprint markings left behind. I leave the cork to dry for around 24 hours and then apply 2 more layers on top before I call it a day with being over perfectionistic and move on to the next stage of detailing. I start off by marking out where I want to add rivet detailing to the helmet, employing some screenshots from the game as a reference. Using these improvised now heads as rivets.
Go and check out the previous videos to find out how time-consumingly tedious they were to make.
And this makeshift tool to replace my huge butterfingers when manhandling the rivets. I then apply some super glue and squash a rivet to each of the markings. With all 53 now heads glued in place, I next add some more markings for eventual battle damage to be applied using my trusty Dremel. Once the battle was over, I used my heat gun to shrink the foam around the cuts to make the damage more defined, and then swiftly moved on to the long-awaited painting stage. First, I needed to prime the helmet for painting using this foam primer from PEARCE PROPS. For a base coat, I aim to cover the majority of the helmet with a light coating of paint. A few hours later, I came back to spray on a second coat, focusing on covering the harder to reach places, and then a third coat after that just for fun. However, in between each layer, I lightly dabbed the wet paint with this chunk of sofa upholstery foam, which left behind a very aesthetically pleasing to the eyeballs effect of a hammered metal texture. Now that the helmet has been painted grey, I'm going to paint it again with some matte black spray paint. I'm adding 3 layers of paint to ensure that everything that was painted grey is now painted black. And in between each layer, I'm sponge dabbing the wet paint for more eye-pleasing metallic goodness. Six layers of paint later, the helmet is black, but I want it to be a metallic silver colour. I'm going to be using this metallic silver acrylic paint to give the helmet its final colouring. I'll be adopting a dry brushing technique using this paintbrush with some tape on it so that the bristles can't spread as I paint. Dab here, and a brush there. I would then use what little paint is left on the brush to tiresomely paint the whole helmet silver. I won't just be painting the helmet once. I painted it a second time and a third time to clear up any dark patches and make the surface look evenly coated. For the final steps of the painting process, I'll be weathering the helmet to make it look old, dirty and used. I start off by using this brown acrylic paint and some water, stirring them together and then applying the paint using this sponge brush. While painting, I cover a section with a dirty brown wash, and before it completely dries, I go back and dab away most of the wash with a paper towel. This leaves behind a faint brown stain resembling dirt and could also be interpreted as rust. This is the effect I want. After repeating this process for the whole of the helmet, I went back and added a thicker layer of wash in the harder to reach places around the face and under the top rim, places that I imagine would be more difficult to clean. To finish off the weathering process, I used some black acrylic paint mixed with water to add some grime to all of the battle damaged areas. I then added some sprays using a thin brush and a little amount of wash, flicking the paint all over the helmet and gently dabbing away the droplets so they blend in with the helmet. Finally, I used the thin brush again to apply a wash around every rivet on the helmet. With the helmet now looking filthy and the final steps finished, I am proud to say that this helmet is completed. Now, it's time for the showcase. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you enjoyed by leaving a like and a comment. Also, comment any suggestions you'd like to see me attempt to make in the future. Additionally, if you'd like to keep in the loop with this channel's development, consider subscribing. It's not like you're signing your life away or anything. See you later.